Hey all, we are just going to continue pressing forwards, trying to get caught up. So we're going to work on chapter 69, the age of Elizabeth, in a child's history of the world. You know, seems like it doesn't matter if it's morning or evening, the yawning just keeps on happening. This story is about the age of Elizabeth. I'm not going to tell you how old Elizabeth was, though she did live and reign many years. I'm going to tell you some of the things that happened during her long life. For the time when she lived is called the age of Elizabeth. So we have ages, we have eras, we have like the Renaissance era, we have the Elizabethan era, we have the age of Elizabeth. So we have all sorts of things that we like to name, huh? All right, so there was a young man named Raleigh living when Elizabeth became queen. One day when it was raining and the streets were muddy, Elizabeth was about to cross the street. Raleigh saw her, and to keep her from soiling her shoes, ran forwards, took off his beautiful velvet cape, and threw it in the puddle where she was about to step, so that she might cross upon it as a carpet. The queen was greatly pleased with his thoughtful and gentlemanly act, and she made him a knight, so that he was then called Sir Walter Raleigh. And ever after that, he was one of her special friends. Sir Walter Raleigh was much interested in America. Cabot had claimed a great part of it for England, although 100 years before, but England had done nothing about it. Raleigh thought something should be done about it. He thought English people should settle there, so that other countries like Spain, which had so many settlements in America, would not get ahead of England. Raleigh got together several companies of English people and sent them over to the island called Roanoke, which was just off the coast of present-day state of North Carolina. At that time, however, almost the whole coast of the United States as far north as Canada was called Virginia. It had been named Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen Elizabeth. Some of these Roanoke colonists became discouraged with the hardships they had to suffer, and so gave up and sailed back home again. Those who remained all disappeared. Where? No one knows. We think they must have been killed or died of starvation. At any rate, not one was left to tell the tale. Among these Roanoke colonists was the first English child born in America, a girl who had been named Virginia Dare, for the Queen was very popular, and a great many girls were named Virginia after her. Some tobacco was brought back from Virginia, and Sir Walter Raleigh learned to smoke. This was such a strange and unknown thing at the time that one day while he was smoking a pipe, a servant who saw smoke coming out of his mouth thought he was on fire, and running for a bucket of water, emptied its contents over his head. Virginia is still famous for its tobacco. At first, tobacco was supposed to be very healthy, for Native Americans seemed to have very good health, and they smoked a great deal. Afterward, however, in the next reign, King James so hated tobacco that he wrote a book about it and forbade its use. Now we know that James was right and that tobacco can make people sick with deadly diseases. After Queen Elizabeth died, Raleigh was put in prison, for it was said he was plotting against the new King James, who came after Elizabeth. The prison where he was placed was the Tower of London, the old castle that William the Conqueror had built. Here, Raleigh was kept for 13 long years, and to pass the time away, he wrote a history of the world. Granted, it's not the one we're reading, but, you know. But at last, he was put to death, as many other great men also were. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth, there lived the great writer of plays, the greatest writer the world has ever known. This man was William Shakespeare. Shakespeare's father could not write his name. Shakespeare himself spent only 6 years at school. As a boy, he was rather wild, and he was arrested for hunting deer in the forest of Sir Thomas Lucy at Stratford. When still a boy, Shakespeare married a girl older than himself named Anne Hathaway. After he had been married a few years, he left her and their 3 children, left the little town of Stratford, and went up to the great city of London to seek his fortune. There, Shakespeare got a job working around a theater, holding the horses of those who came to see the plays. Then he got a chance to act in the theater, and he became an actor. But he did not become a very good one. In those days, the theater had no scenery. A sign was put up to tell what the scene was supposed to be. For instance, instead of forest scenery, they would put up a sign saying, "This is a forest." Or instead of a room scene, a sign would say, "This is a room in an inn." There were no actresses. Men and boys took parts of both men and women. Shakespeare was asked to change some of the plays that had already been written so that they could be better acted. He did this very well. Then he started in to write plays himself. Usually he took old stories and made them into plays, but he did it so wonderfully well that they are better than any plays that have ever been written before or since. Though Shakespeare left school when only 13 years old, he seems to have had a remarkable knowledge of almost everything under the sun. He shows in his plays that he knew about history and law and medicine. Some of the best known of Shakespeare's plays are Hamlet, The Merchant of Venice, Romeo and Juliet, and Julius Caesar. Shakespeare made a good deal of money for those times, almost a fortune. Then he left London and went back to live in the little town of Stratford where he was born. Here at last he died and was buried in the village church. People wanted to move his body to a greater and handsomer place, to a famous church in London. But someone, perhaps Shakespeare himself, had written a verse which was carved on his tombstone. The last line of this verse said, "And cursed be he who moves my bones." So they were never moved, for no one dared to move them. All right, stay tuned. We're going to flip through chapter 70 here pretty quick too. Ta-ta for now. Bye.